Roman Reigns has collapsed backstage, and the truth is finally out. After battling leukemia once before, the tribal chief now faces the most heartbreaking fight of his life. In this emotional expose, we follow Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, and Jey Uso as they say their final goodbye to their leader and cousin. From locker room whispers to WWE's silent tribute, discover the story behind the scenes that has left the entire wrestling world in tears. It didn't begin with a retirement speech. There was no farewell tour, no grand WrestleMania moment beneath the lights. It began with a whisper. A breathless murmur backstage on a stormy Monday night in Cleveland. Just past 9 p.m., as the second hour of Raw flickered across television screens around the world, a quiet panic broke loose behind the curtain. A paramedic's radio crackled. A WWE producer dropped their headset. And down the long corridor that led to Roman Reigns' locker room, a sudden stillness fell. Too still for the chaos of Monday Night Raw. Moments later, the call came through. A medical emergency. No one was prepared for what they found. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, the head of the table, was lying motionless on the cold tile floor. His eyes were open, but blank. He was breathing, but shallow. Paul Heyman was already at his side, clutching his phone in one hand, trembling. A single phrase repeated on his lips over and over like a prayer, "Not again, not again." What happened next unfolded in less than 4 minutes but shattered a legacy over a decade in the making. Security rushed to clear the hallway. Superstars who had once feared him now stood frozen, helpless. It wasn't just a man down, it was the collapse of a symbol. Of dominance. Of dynasty. Within the hour, he was transported to a private medical facility just outside the city. WWE's top brass issued a generic statement: Roman Reigns is being evaluated for an undisclosed health condition. He is resting comfortably and surrounded by family. But insiders knew the truth. And this time, it wasn't storyline. This wasn't a scripted injury. This wasn't part of some shocking WrestleMania angle. This was real. And it was terrifying. Because the leukemia that Roman Reigns had once bravely beaten was back. In the days that followed, silence fell over the WWE Universe like a funeral shroud. There were no tweets from Roman. No Instagram posts. No updates on commentary. Just a growing dread, an ache in the heart of every fan, as rumors began to spill. One unnamed source inside WWE's medical team told us, it wasn't just a recurrence. It was aggressive. Sudden. We're talking hours, not weeks. By the time they caught it, it had already spread. He paused. Swallowed. They told him he might not step in the ring again. Not just because of treatment, but because his body might not survive it. The news rippled across the locker room like thunder. Seth Rollins, one of Roman's oldest brothers in the business, canceled an appearance and flew out to see him. Triple H made private calls to Stamford execs, reportedly telling them to prepare for the worst. And backstage, no one dared say it out loud, but the question hung over everyone's head: was this the end of Roman Reigns? But amid the chaos, 3 men moved in silence. Not for attention. Not for the cameras. But because blood demanded it. Solo Sikoa. Jimmy Uso. Jey Uso. The Anoa'i bloodline. They arrived in Cleveland 2 days after the collapse. No entrance music. No entourage. Just family. 3 brothers who had stood on both sides of war with Roman, but now stood united by something greater than wrestling. A hospital staff member later described the moment they arrived. You could feel the air shift, she said. They weren't crying. They weren't speaking. They just walked in, and everyone moved out of their way. Solo led them. Eyes like stone. Jaw clenched so tightly he hadn't spoken since boarding the flight. The 3 men entered Roman's private room, where he lay pale, weakened, hooked to monitors. For the first time, the man once called the tribal chief looked small. Mortal. And then, something unthinkable happened. Jimmy, who had once super-kicked Roman in front of millions, collapsed into tears. He dropped to one knee beside the bed, grabbed Roman's hand, and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to end like this." Roman looked at him, eyes heavy, lips trembling. "You always had my heart," he whispered. "Even when you turned on me." Jay stood frozen. This was the cousin he had gone to war with. Bled with. Walked out on. And now, it might be the last time he'd see him alive. But Solo said nothing. He walked to the far side of the room, stared out the window at the gray Ohio sky, and clenched his fists. He had watched Roman fall once before. Back in 2018, when leukemia first took him out of the ring. Solo was still training back then, just another hungry cousin in the shadow of greatness. He remembered watching Roman's return, his speech, the tears in his eyes as he said he was in remission. But now? The remission was over. Doctors had told the family that Roman's immune system had begun to shut down. That he had maybe months, if the treatments worked. Weeks, if they didn't. WWE had already begun pulling Roman's name from promotional material. Merchandise was quietly removed from upcoming campaigns. The creative team had gone radio silent. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was that three men who once tore each other apart over the bloodline crown were now sitting in silence beside the man they all once bowed to. Roman Reigns was dying. And he knew it. In a private conversation with Paul Heyman. One we later learned about through a source inside the hospital, Roman had said, "Don't let them turn this into a storyline. Not this. Not this time." Paul reportedly nodded, tears in his eyes. "Of course not. This is real. Too real." That's when Roman made a final request, to see his brothers again. To say goodbye the way warriors do, not in a ring. Not in an arena. But as family. As blood. So they came. The Usos, who once called themselves the Ones. Solo Sikoa, the silent warrior who took up Roman's mantle. And there, in that quiet hospital room, amid the beeping of monitors and the soft hum of 4 drips, the Anoa'i family sat for what might be the last time together. They told stories. Laughed between tears. Remembered WrestleMania moments. Talked about their grandfather, the great Peter Maivia. About Yokozuna. About the wild Samoans. About the legacy they were all born into, and how Roman had carried it like no one else ever had. "He made us more than just family," Jay whispered. "He made us legends. But even legends fall." And Roman, the greatest of them all, was ready. That night, after the family left, a nurse overheard Roman speaking softly to his wife Galena, who had flown in earlier that week with their children. "If I don't wake up tomorrow, tell them I did it for them. All of it." The world outside the hospital didn't know this yet. But those who were there, who witnessed the silent collapse of a king, knew the truth: the era of Roman Reigns was over. Not because he lost a belt. Not because of some betrayal. But because real life, harsh, unforgiving life, had struck its final spear. And yet, he never once asked for pity. He never asked for a tribute. Only for peace. Only for forgiveness. Only for his family to be whole again. And in that hospital room in Cleveland, for the first time in years, they were. Outside the hospital, the wrestling world continued spinning, unaware of the fragile thread holding Roman Reigns' life together. But inside WWE headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut, there was no mistaking the shift. A quiet panic had begun unraveling behind closed doors. Board meetings were abruptly rescheduled. Creative discussions about SummerSlam rewrites went dead in the water. And above it all loomed the question no one wanted to face: what does WWE look like without Roman Reigns? For more than a decade, he had been the face of the company. The center of every poster, every pay-per-view, every chant that echoed through arenas from Philadelphia to Riyadh. The man they once booed mercilessly, only to later revere as an icon. Roman had become more than a performer. He was the WWE's anchor. A presence so constant that removing him from the roster felt less like a creative challenge and more like a collapse of gravity itself. Internally, producers began floating contingency plans. Could Seth Rollins step into the spotlight once more? Was it time to fast-track Solo Sikoa as the next face of the Anoa'i dynasty? One executive even pitched a farewell tribute episode, something dignified, emotional, global. But Triple H reportedly shut it down. Roman doesn't want this to be a funeral, he said. He wants this to be family. Private. Not content. Even so, news began to trickle. Slowly at first. A hushed rumor whispered to a ringside journalist. A cryptic tweet from an old ally. A fan photograph outside the Cleveland hospital, blurry but unmistakable, Paul Heyman walking with his head bowed. The WWE Universe erupted with concern. Searches for Roman Reigns' health spiked across the globe. Reddit threads multiplied by the hour. On TikTok, clips of Roman's emotional promos, especially his return speech in 2019 after his first leukemia battle, were shared by millions. And then, at last, WWE broke their silence. It came in the form of a simple black and white Instagram post. No music. No montage. Just a photograph, Roman Reigns, seated in a quiet hallway backstage, his hands folded, head down, title belt resting across his lap. The caption read, "The tribal chief is fighting a different kind of battle. Out of respect for Roman and his family, we ask for privacy and prayers." #Thank you Roman. That was it. No dates. No diagnosis. No spin. But to the fans who had walked this journey with Roman, from his days as the silent powerhouse of the Shield to his tyrannical reign as bloodline leader, the message was clear: this wasn't just a break. This was goodbye. Backstage at SmackDown that Friday, the atmosphere was electric with sorrow. Superstars exchanged glances in hallways, unsure whether to speak his name aloud. Becky Lynch was seen embracing Seth Rollins for an unusually long time. Cody Rhodes removed his headset after rehearsal and quietly left the building without explanation. Even Vince McMahon, who had grown increasingly reclusive in recent years, reportedly made a private call to the Reigns family to offer his respects. But no moment was more powerful than the one that played out after the cameras stopped rolling that night. Untelevised. Unscripted. Raw. The Usos and Solo Sikoa walked out to the ring in front of a stunned crowd in Orlando. No theme music. No pyro. Just three men with broken hearts. The arena, at first confused, went completely silent. Jimmy took the mic first. "We didn't come out here as the bloodline tonight," he said. "We came out here as Joseph's cousins. As family. As sons. As brothers." Jay stepped forward, tears already in his eyes. Roman Reigns isn't just a champion. He's not just the tribal chief. He's the guy who carried us when we couldn't carry ourselves. Who believed in us when we didn't believe in ourselves. And then Solo. Quiet, usually silent Solo, took the mic. His voice was low, almost trembling. "He told me I was the future. That I had to protect this family when he was gone. I didn't understand what he meant, until now." He looked directly into the camera. "Roman, if you're watching this, we got you. Always." There were no chants. No interruptions. Just thousands of fans standing in hushed solidarity. For that one moment, the show didn't matter. Wins, losses, feuds. They all dissolved under the weight of reality. The following Monday on Raw, a tribute package aired. Grainy Shield debut footage. WrestleMania victories. The cancer announcement. The thunderous comeback. The rise of the bloodline. It ended with one final clip, Roman holding both belts high above his head at Clash at the Castle, the crowd roaring like a tidal wave. Then the screen went black. No words. Just silence. And in that silence, fans around the world felt the truth settle in. They were witnessing the twilight of a king. Back in Cleveland, Roman was still fighting. But the fight was harder now. His immune system was deteriorating faster than doctors expected. Chemo treatments left him weak, unable to eat for days at a time. At night, he would drift in and out of sleep, sometimes murmuring old promo lines under his breath. Wreck everyone, and leave, believe that. Galena stayed by his side, rarely leaving the room. Their children, too young to grasp the full weight of the situation, drew him pictures. One featured a crown and a smiling stick figure labeled Dada. He held it against his chest when he slept. As the days passed, Roman requested fewer visitors. His voice was faint. His body frail. But when Solo came in one last time, Roman opened his eyes and managed a small smile. "I need you to lead them now," he whispered. Solo nodded. "Not as tribal chief," Roman said. "As a brother. A protector. Not a tyrant." Those were the last words he spoke to him. In that moment, something shifted in Solo Sikoa's eyes. The rage he had once used to destroy locker rooms melted into something else. Conviction. And when he returned to the locker room that week, he wasn't the same. No more outbursts. No more silence. He simply looked each of his cousins in the eye and said, "Let's honor him. In everything we do from now on." In the weeks that followed, the WWE landscape began to shift. Not with explosions or betrayals, but with quiet, purposeful changes. The bloodline appeared less frequently on television. No more promos soaked in arrogance. No more staged coups or locker room chaos. Just silence. Absence. And for those who watched closely, something far more haunting: respect. WWE had made an unspoken pact, one that crossed brands, rivalries, and egos. Roman Reigns was not to be written off in a storyline. There would be no on-screen injury angle, no dramatic heel turn from Solo to capitalize on the situation. His name was not to be exploited. Only honored. Triple H issued a private directive to the creative team. "We're not erasing Roman. We're remembering him. Week by week. In action. In reverence." That's when WWE quietly announced it, the Roman Reigns Legacy Series. Over 8 consecutive episodes, WWE would dedicate segments to Roman's most iconic moments. From his historic WrestleMania 38 title unification to his emotional leukemia return speech in 2019. Old rivals like Braun Strowman, Cody Rhodes, Kevin Owens, and even John Cena recorded special sit-down interviews, each remembering the man, not the character. One of the most powerful interviews came from Seth Rollins. Dressed in a simple black suit, no sunglasses, no cackling bravado, Seth sat in a darkened room and stared into the camera for several seconds before speaking. "I've known Roman since before the rest of the world knew who Roman was. Back when we were just kids in dusty Florida gyms trying to figure out who we were supposed to be. He was always the anchor. Always the one who kept us grounded. People talk about Roman like he was born into greatness, but they didn't see the years of sacrifice. The pain. The weight of that legacy on his shoulders every single day." He paused. People called him a locker room leader. But he wasn't just that. He was our big brother. And this place, it doesn't feel like home without him. As the episodes aired, fans across the world flooded social media with the hashtag #ThankYouRoman. Murals appeared outside arenas in Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York. One artist in Tokyo painted a 30-foot mural of Roman wearing his red gauntlet, head bowed, surrounded by doves. But even as the world mourned, one question lingered behind every tribute, every candlelit vigil, every heartfelt tweet. Was Roman still fighting? The truth, as we later learned, was both devastating and inspiring. Doctors had told Roman's family that the chemotherapy was no longer working. The aggressive nature of the leukemia had overwhelmed his immune system. There were treatments available, experimental, high risk, and painful. But they offered no guarantee. At best, they might buy him time. A few months. Maybe more. Roman was given the choice. And in classic Roman Reigns fashion, he asked just one question. Will it keep me here long enough to see WrestleMania? The doctor hesitated. Possibly, he said. Roman looked at his wife. Then at the picture his daughter had drawn, still taped to the wall beside his bed. Then let's fight. Word of his decision leaked quietly through the locker room. But this time, no one tweeted. No one leaked to the dirt sheets. No one tried to profit from the pain. Because everyone knew, this was sacred. Meanwhile, WWE began making internal preparations for something unthinkable. A farewell. Not in the ring. Not in front of fireworks or 70,000 screaming fans. But something more intimate. More permanent. Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, and Paul Heyman began collaborating with the Reigns family on a tribute that would honor Roman not just as a performer, but as a man. A father. A son. A warrior who gave everything, even his life, to the business he loved. It would be called The Final Reign. Set to take place the night before WrestleMania in a private ceremony at the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, only a select few were invited: family, closest friends, Shield brothers, and the next generation of superstars Roman helped inspire. The ceremony was to be off-air. No press. No storyline. But then, something unexpected happened. Roman Reigns, hooked to machines, enduring round-the-clock pain, made a request of his own. Let the fans see it. They've earned that much. And just like that, WWE changed everything. WrestleMania weekend became a pilgrimage. Fans from around the world flew in, not just for the matches, but for him. Roman's tribute would air live, unedited, across the WWE network, with all proceeds donated to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Merchandise was pulled from shelves, and replaced with a single shirt, a black tee. No logo. No slogan. Just one phrase in white: I acknowledge you. The night of the tribute, the Performance Center was transformed. A quiet arena. Soft lights. A single spotlight on the ring. No ramp. No pyro. Just respect. And then, he appeared. Roman Reigns. Weakened. Thin. Moving slowly with the help of Solo and Seth Rollins. But standing. Dressed in all black. Title belt draped over his shoulder one last time. The crowd inside, just a few hundred, stood in stunned silence. Then, one fan whispered. "Thank you, Roman." Another echoed it. Then a third. And soon, the entire building rose in one collective voice, chanting, not shouting, "Thank you, Roman." He took the mic. Paused. Then smiled. "I don't have much strength left. But I've got enough to say this. I've never needed the titles. I never needed the chance. I just needed you. All of you. Because without the WWE Universe, I was just Joe. But with you, I was the tribal chief. And that meant everything to me." He handed the mic to Solo. And for the first time, Solo Sikoa called Roman by his real name. "I love you, Joe." The crowd fell quiet again. Roman nodded. Then held up a single finger. The ones. And just like that, it was done. The next morning, the world awoke to headlines that read like the closing chapter of a legend. Roman Reigns bids farewell in emotional WWE tribute. The Final Reign. News outlets from ESPN to BBC ran segments on the ceremony. Social media platforms were consumed by clips of Roman's final words, of Seth Rollins holding back tears, of Solo raising his cousin's hand one last time beneath the soft lights of the Performance Center. But something far more profound was happening beneath the surface. For the first time in years, WWE was no longer defined by power struggles, betrayals, or forced coronations. It was defined by grief, unity, and the deep, echoing truth that something monumental had ended. Backstage at WrestleMania, the mood was reverent. The usual hustle of pre-show preparations, the clicking of suit shoes, the slam of flight cases, the buzz of rehearsal radios, was replaced with an almost eerie quiet. Superstars moved through the halls with bowed heads. Some wore the "I acknowledge you" shirt under their gear. Others scrawled messages in silver Sharpie on their wrists. For Joe. One last spear. The Chief forever. That night, WrestleMania began without the usual voiceover. No dramatic recap. No cinematic teaser. Just the lights going dark, and then a lone spotlight illuminating the center of the ring. There, standing tall in silence, was Paul Heyman. No mic. No introduction. Just a single act. He walked to the corner, slowly placed Roman's ceremonial Ula beads on the canvas, and then backed away. The crowd of 70,000 rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 3 minutes. And then, the show began. But this time every punch thrown, every title lifted, every stare down between warriors, it all felt different. As if every performer was wrestling in the shadow of something greater. The tribal chief was no longer watching from the locker room. He was watching from memory. From legacy. From legend. In the days that followed, questions began swirling. Who would lead the locker room now? Who would carry the torch that Roman had held for so long with such gravity and grace? The answer wasn't immediate. And that was the point. Roman's absence wasn't a gap to be filled. It was a reminder. That leadership is not taken. It is earned. That legacy isn't in the number of title reigns, but in the respect you leave behind. But in the shadows of this morning, something was stirring. Solo Sikoa. The once silent enforcer of the bloodline was no longer the brooding assassin in the background. Something in him had changed since that hospital visit. Since the final whisper Roman had shared with him. He wasn't snarling. He wasn't screaming. He was focused. Clear-eyed. Controlled. He began showing up to Raw and SmackDown dressed not in his usual gear, but in a simple black tracksuit, no music, no pyro. And when he spoke, his words were few, but razor sharp. "I'm not here to be the new tribal chief," he told Kayla Braxton in a rare backstage interview. "I'm here to protect what he built. Not just the family, but the legacy. And if anyone wants to disrespect that legacy, they'll answer to me." The next week, a match was announced, Solo Sikoa vs. Cody Rhodes. No titles on the line. Just honor. The match was brutal. Personal. No interference. No shortcuts. Just two men fighting for the soul of WWE. And when Solo Sikoa won, clean, center of the ring, something unspoken passed between him and the audience. They didn't boo. They didn't chant "you suck." They stood. And slowly, they raised their fingers. The ones. Not for the ego of a faction. But for the man they'd lost. For the leader who gave everything, and left behind something unbreakable. In the months that followed, WWE entered what fans began calling the Era of Honor. Not because Roman demanded it. But because his absence reminded everyone what mattered. The titles were still fought for. Rivalries still burned. But beneath every storyline was a thread of reverence. A code. Even the heels, those who once lived to destroy Roman's image, stepped carefully now. Logan Paul, in a press conference, refused to mock the tribal chief. "Say what you want," he said. "But Roman Reigns was the last guy who made me feel like I was fighting a god." And then, on a quiet afternoon in June, 4 months after the hospital collapse, a private message was shared to the WWE Universe. A short, grainy video posted on Paul Heyman's social media account. It showed Roman Reigns. Thinner. Bald from chemo. Wrapped in a blanket. But smiling. I heard Solo won, he said, voice hoarse but proud. I told you. He's the one. He paused, breathing heavily, then leaned forward. I'm not gone yet. And if there's a way, if this body gives me one more match, I'll be there. He raised one trembling finger. One last time. The video ended there. The internet exploded. The world paused. No one knew if it was real hope or just a final gift to the fans. But it didn't matter. Because Roman Reigns, whether he returned or not, had already done the impossible. He turned pain into purpose. He turned blood into legacy. And in his absence, he left behind not just a company or a faction, but a kingdom. A kingdom that still acknowledged him. And always would. The video of Roman Reigns, fragile but defiant, did more than just ignite hope. It became a symbol. A spark that swept across the WWE Universe with the force of a tidal wave. Fans around the world clung to those trembling words like gospel. If this body gives me one more match, those 9 words awakened something dormant, not just in the fanbase, but in the very soul of WWE. In the weeks that followed, locker room morale changed. Superstars walked through gorilla position with renewed purpose, as if every step, every move, every promo carried a deeper meaning. The knowledge that Roman was still watching, still connected, gave every segment more weight. Backstage veterans, Randy Orton, The Miz, even John Cena, privately offered to take reduced schedules to help stabilize the locker room during this uncertain time. There was a shared understanding that no one man could replace Roman, but together, they could uphold the standard he set. And Solo Sikoa, who had for so long lived in the shadows of others, became the beating heart of that standard. He didn't wear a crown. He didn't call himself tribal chief. But his actions, quiet and lethal, told the story. His feuds were raw. Brutal. Clean. Every match ended the same way, hand raised, eyes to the sky, a single finger pointed upward. Not for dominance, but for devotion. The fans, too, had changed. You could hear it in the way arenas fell silent when Roman's old entrance theme played softly in tribute packages. You could see it in the signs, hand-painted and waving above crowds like prayers, "Stay strong, Chief. Come back home, Joe. We acknowledge you." Then came the night that shook the foundations once more. It was an unadvertised Raw. No build. No teases. But just as the main event concluded, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. On the Titantron, a video began to play, black and white footage from the Performance Center ceremony, Roman's speech, the moment he passed the torch to Solo. And when it ended, the screen faded to black. Then, a voice. Roman's voice. Soft. Raspy. But clear. "I'm still here." The crowd erupted. Not in chants, not in noise, but in emotion. Some fans wept openly. Others embraced. Roman Reigns had spoken again. And that single phrase, pre-recorded or not, became a war cry for hope. "I'm still here" was printed on shirts, spray-painted in murals, sung through the rafters. And quietly, behind the scenes, WWE began whispering about something bigger. WrestleMania next year. One night only. If Roman's body allows. One final match. The final spear. Doctors remained cautious. The treatment was brutal. His immune system was fragile. But Roman, ever the fighter, ever the anchor of his people, pushed forward. Galena stayed at his side. His children read him fan messages from around the world. Even the McMahon family, distant in recent years, sent a private letter of gratitude. Not for the ratings. Not for the empire he helped build. But for reminding them what WWE truly meant. Weeks turned into months. And though Roman's condition was unstable, his spirit never wavered. Some nights, Paul Heyman would sit with him in silence, recounting the evolution of the bloodline. They would laugh about the chaos of it all. Sami Zayn's honorary use phase, the betrayals, the manipulation. And at one point, Roman, half lucid from medication, gripped Heyman's hand and whispered, "Tell them it was always love. Even when it looked like war." Heyman wept. Back on television, WWE began building toward a new foundation. Solo and the Usos were formed, not as the old bloodline, but as something reimagined. The Anoa'i legacy. They didn't fight for power anymore. They fought for memory. For culture. For Roman. At Survivor Series, a special 10-bell salute rang through the arena, not for death, but for tribute. The bell tolled 10 times, each one echoing with the weight of a decade. As it ended, the camera cut to Solo in the ring, his eyes closed, his hand raised. And then, something happened that no one expected. From the entrance ramp, Seth Rollins appeared. Dressed in black. No sunglasses. No theatrics. He walked down to the ring. Face to face with Solo. The crowd held their breath. And then, without a word, he raised Solo's hand in acknowledgement. 2 eras. 1 torch. No division. Later that night, backstage footage showed Seth sitting alone, staring at an old Shield photo taped to his locker. It was the 3 of them, Roman, Dean, and Seth, young, dangerous, invincible. A cameraman caught him whispering a single sentence. He was the heart. Roman's health remained guarded. Some days, he couldn't stand. Other days, he was seen walking slowly through the Cleveland hospital gardens, escorted by Galena. On one occasion, a fan spotted him and asked if he was coming back. Roman smiled. "If I do, it'll be for the ones who still believe in legacy." And so, the world waited. Not for an announcement. Not for a retirement speech. But for a miracle. And maybe, just maybe, Roman Reigns would give them one. Because he was still here. Because kings don't die, they ascend. And though the tribal chief no longer roamed the ring, his presence was everywhere. In every roar of the crowd. In every spear thrown. In every brotherhood forged in fire. He had become more than a superstar. He had become a story. A legacy. A reign that would echo for generations. And whether he returned or not, one thing was certain. The WWE Universe would never forget the name Roman Reigns. Not now. Not ever. Because legends don't fade. They reign forever. And somewhere behind the curtain of time, behind the walls of silence and struggle, he was still standing. Still fighting. Still here. A king. Until the very end. Weeks passed. Then months. Seasons shifted. The roar of the crowd in packed arenas never quite sounded the same. Even on nights filled with title defenses and surprise returns, there was always something missing. It wasn't a face. It wasn't even the voice. It was the weight. The gravity that Roman Reigns carried when he stepped into an arena. His mere presence used to still the noise. Command attention. Demand respect. And without him, there was a void no one could name, but everyone felt. In the locker rooms, his legacy continued to ripple in quiet gestures. Veterans reminded rookies to clean up after themselves, Roman's rule. The main event talents arrived early and left last, not because they had to, but because that's what Roman did. People spoke his name not in sadness, but in reverence. Like you'd speak of a hero who once held the sky up with both hands. Then came the letter. It arrived on a quiet Friday afternoon at WWE headquarters. Hand-delivered by an Anoa'i family member. No signature. Just a wax seal bearing the tribal symbol Roman once wore on his gauntlet. Triple H read it first. Alone. Then passed it to Stephanie. Then Heyman. Word spread slowly. Carefully. It was Roman's final message to the company. A private farewell. But before anyone could even think about leaking it, Roman's wife Galena made a call. She asked for it to be shared with the fans. All of them. Every single one who'd ever bought a ticket, shouted his name, hated him, loved him, or even doubted him. That night, WWE did something rare. They broke their usual protocol. No build-up. No suspense. Just a cold open. A single white screen. And Roman's words. "My name is Joe Anoa'i. You knew me as Roman Reigns. But before I was the big dog, before I was the tribal chief, before I held up titles with blood on my back, I was a kid with a dream. A dream to walk out of that curtain, into the lights, and earn your respect. Some nights, I felt like a god. Other nights, I felt broken. I lost friends. I lost matches. I lost parts of myself. But every time I wanted to quit, your voices pulled me back in. When I fought leukemia the first time, I thought it would break me. But you lifted me up. And when it came back, you lifted me again. This time, the fight is different. This time, the ring might not be waiting. But the story doesn't end just because the music fades. Because a real reign isn't about how long you hold a belt. It's about how long you're remembered. If this is goodbye, then thank you, for making a kid from Pensacola feel like a king. And if it's not goodbye, then I'll see you soon. Believe that. The video ended. No sound. No branding. No follow-up segment. And yet, across the world, millions wept. WWE began planning a global tribute tour. One city each month. No matches. Just presence. The Anoa'i family would appear on stage in each location. A rotating group of stars, Uso brothers, Solo, Seth, Heyman, would speak. Fans would be invited to write letters, drop off memorabilia, share stories. In Los Angeles, a fan left a photo of her and Roman at a meet and greet in 2017. She was holding her baby daughter. Taped to the frame was a note. "She's 6 now. She still says Oea before every school recital." In London, a former leukemia patient brought his championship replica belt, kissed it, and left it on the stage. "You helped me through it," he whispered. "I hope we helped you." And in Philadelphia, where Roman had once been booed louder than any man alive, thousands filled the Wells Fargo Center in complete silence. No chants. No signs. Just unity. Backstage, Solo Sikoa stood behind the curtain, watching. Not as a warrior. But as a brother. He wasn't wearing his gear. He wore Roman's hoodie. Black. Simple. "Acknowledge me" on the chest. A fan reached out, touched his shoulder, and asked, "Do you think he knows how much we loved him?" Solo looked down, his throat tight, his voice cracking. "He knows," he said. "He always knew." Back in Cleveland, Roman's health remained fragile. But he still fought. Still walked when he could. Still smiled when his children climbed into bed beside him. And on his better days, he watched wrestling, not as a critic, but as a fan again. One night, he saw Solo defeat Drew McIntyre clean in the main event of Raw. Roman turned to Galena and said, "He's ready. He doesn't need to lead like I did. He needs to lead like him." Another night, he watched Jey Uso deliver a promo that brought the crowd to its feet, breaking down in tears on live TV. Roman nodded. He found his voice. And then came the moment that made the world gasp. It was a quiet episode of SmackDown. Nothing major on the card. But in the final segment, as the arena lights dimmed, and fans began gathering their things, the screen flickered. Static. Then Roman Reigns' face appeared. Gaunt. Pale. But smiling. "Just checking in," he said. The crowd erupted. "You thought I was gone?" "Nah. I'm just watching. Still with you. Still proud. Still fighting. For me. For you. For all of us." He held up his hand. One finger. The arena fell silent. Then roared louder than it had all year. He didn't need to say more. That look in his eyes said everything. The chief hadn't surrendered. He had simply ascended. Roman Reigns might never return to the ring. Or he might. The doctors didn't know. The family couldn't say. But one thing was certain, carved into the very soul of the WWE and every fan who ever raised a hand to the sky, Roman Reigns would never leave them. Not truly. Because reigns end. But legends? Legends last forever. And this one was just getting started. The months passed like echoes. Tribute after tribute, city after city, the world kept showing up for him. From Sao Paulo to Toronto, Sydney to Cape Town, arenas overflowed not with wrestling matches, but with memory. With respect. With the kind of reverence usually reserved for myth, not men. And yet, Roman Reigns had become just that, a myth that breathed. That watched. That waited. Fans no longer asked if he was coming back. They didn't dare. They felt him in the atmosphere, in every opening promo, in the pauses between announcer cues. Roman wasn't a name anymore. He was a pulse, a shadow of presence so deeply woven into WWE's fabric that even in silence, he spoke louder than anyone. Then came the whispers. It started as a rumor, an overheard conversation between a production assistant and a backstage medic during a live taping of Raw. No name was mentioned, but the tone was electric, almost fearful. He cleared the mobility test? A second voice. Yeah, he's walking. Unassisted. Those two sentences spread like wildfire, blazing through dirt sheets, Discord servers, and Reddit threads within hours. Fans held their breath. Then a tweet appeared. From Paul Heyman's official account. No caption. No quote. Just a photo. Roman's wrestling boots. Resting beside a folded tactical vest. At first, it felt like a memorial. But the caption came minutes later. Every empire deserves a final battle. The internet exploded. And while WWE issued no confirmation, no denial, something changed that week. Solo Sikoa appeared on SmackDown in full ceremonial Samoan attire for the first time, bare feet, traditional beads, body paint streaked across his face. He didn't wrestle. He didn't speak. He walked to the ring. Held up a mic. And said 5 words, "The chief is coming home." The crowd went berserk. Chants of Roman. Roman shook the arena. Twitter trended worldwide. But the locker room knew, this wasn't a gimmick. This wasn't marketing. Roman Reigns was preparing for one final appearance. But it wouldn't be a match. It would be something bigger. A reckoning. And so WWE began the countdown, silently, respectfully. They cleared space at the upcoming WrestleMania. Not a main event. Not a title match. A moment. A segment unlike anything in company history. The last reign. Not promoted with pyro or taglines. Promoted only with a time. Night 2. 10:45 p.m. One man. One ring. One truth. The day arrived. WrestleMania Sunday. Over 75,000 packed into MetLife Stadium. Everyone knew what was coming, but no one could predict how it would feel. The show unfolded as usual. Champions defended. Legends returned. The crowd roared. But as 10:45 approached, everything changed. The lights dimmed. The noise dropped. Michael Cole removed his headset. Corey Graves stood. No commentary. Just silence. Then, the opening notes. Faint. Familiar. The deep bass of Roman's old theme, stripped down to a single drumbeat. A spotlight lit the stage. He emerged. Slowly. No vest. No boots. No gloves. Just Roman Reigns. Or rather, Joe Anoa'i. Dressed in black Samoan robes. His hair loose. His walk steady. His eyes alive. He entered the ring slowly. Looked out at the sea of faces. And then, he spoke. I wasn't supposed to be here. The crowd held its breath. There were days I couldn't move. Days I couldn't stand. Days I couldn't even remember who I used to be. A pause. His eyes scanned the crowd. But I remembered you. Every cheer. Every boo. Every finger raised. You didn't just believe in the tribal chief. You believed in me. And that gave me something to fight for. The arena stood in silence. Some cried. Some smiled through tears. Everyone listened. I'm not here to win a title. I'm not here to make a comeback. I'm here to say thank you. And to remind you that what we built was more than a run. More than a gimmick. It was a brotherhood. A movement. A reign that changed this place forever. He reached down. Unwrapped the ceremonial ulafala from his neck. Placed it in the center of the ring. I lay this down not as a man who's finished, but as a man who finished what he started. Just then, Solo Sikoa walked to the ring. No music. No spotlight. Just presence. He stepped in. Kneeled. Roman reached out. Touched his shoulder. And whispered, your time now. Solo nodded. The two embraced. Then Seth Rollins appeared. Then Jey Uso. Then Jimmy. Then Cody Rhodes. Then Sami Zayn. No music. No pageantry. One by one, they stepped into the ring. Surrounding Roman. And together, they all raised one finger. The ones. The symbol not of power, but of unity. Of legacy. Of respect. Roman stood in the center. Then slowly, turned. Walked out of the ring. And never looked back. The camera held on the empty ring. On the beads. On the echo of something that could never be replaced. And as the final shot faded to black, one phrase appeared across the screen. Reign's end. Legends remain. And so he was gone. But everywhere. Forever. The ring stood empty that night, but the world felt full. Full of echoes, of memory, of something sacred left behind. Roman Reigns hadn't just walked away. He had transcended. No pyrotechnics, no swerve, no final spear or Superman punch, just a man who carried a kingdom, setting it down with grace. And as WrestleMania faded into history, a new chapter began, not with an explosion, but with silence. But silence never lasts in WWE. The very next Friday on SmackDown, the first Ripple hit. A quiet voiceover introduced the show. Not the usual high-energy sizzle reel. Just Solo Sikoa's voice, calm and measured. When you carry the weight of a dynasty, you don't talk about it. You feel it. Every breath. Every match. Every threat. Then the screen lit up with a single word in blood-red letters. Successor. Solo emerged later that night, not to Roman's music, but to a new entrance altogether. No lyrics. Just war drums. A deep, guttural rhythm that felt ancient, tribal. He wore the ulafala that Roman had laid down. Not around his neck, but across his shoulder. A reminder. A burden. A crown. He walked to the ring flanked by Jimmy and Jay, not as followers, but as brothers in arms. Equal. The dynamic had shifted. This wasn't about domination anymore. This was about defense. Of legacy. Of family. In his first promo since WrestleMania, Solo addressed the WWE Universe directly. There's no replacing Roman. There's no copying what he built. But this family, this bloodline, it doesn't end. It adapts. It evolves. And now, it answers to me. The fans watched in stunned silence. This wasn't the Solo they had known. The silent wrecking ball. The sullen shadow. This was a man reborn. And then the lights cut. A voice crackled through the arena. You think you deserve his crown? It was Randy Orton. He stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand, eyes narrowed. He was the tribal chief. You're just the cleanup crew. The challenge was laid bare. The Viper versus the successor. And suddenly, Solo's reign wasn't symbolic anymore. It was under attack. In the weeks that followed, Orton did what he always did, psychological warfare. He taunted Jimmy and Jay, re-aired old footage of Roman doubting them, tried to fracture the unity that was still fragile in the wake of their cousin's departure. But Solo remained silent. Focused. Deadly. He didn't play mind games. He made statements. At Backlash, the match was set. Solo Sikoa versus Randy Orton. Not for a title. For legacy. The match was brutal. Not flashy. Not fast-paced. It was war. Body against body. Blood drawn early. Chairs bent. Tables shattered. But in the final moments, as Orton stalked Solo for the final RKO, something flickered on the Titantron. A single word. Believe. Orton hesitated for half a second, and that was all Solo needed. Spinning Solo. 1, 2, 3. Victory. But the match wasn't the headline. What came after was. Solo stood in the center of the ring. Soaked in blood. Breathing hard. He looked up at the screen. And there, for the briefest second, Roman Reigns appeared. Not live. A pre-recorded message. You defended it well, little brother. Now build it better. And the screen went black. No chance. No noise. Just awe. Because even from the shadows, Roman was still watching. Still guiding. But now, this was Solo's time. The next week, the Anoa'i legacy officially rebranded. A new faction logo. New theme. Same mission. No longer the bloodline. Now, simply, the line. A line that traced back to Maivia. To the Samoan SWAT team. To The Rock. To Roman. And now, to Solo. Under his leadership, new faces began to circle. Zilla Fatu. Lance Anoa'i. Jacob Fatu, once considered too wild to control, now operating under a quiet, focused purpose. And in the distance, whispers of one more name. Nia Jax. The female enforcer. Because the family was growing. The throne was evolving. And WWE, whether ready or not, was entering an era forged in fire and forged by pain. Roman Reigns wasn't gone. He had simply passed the torch to a new flame. A slower burn. A deeper fire. And now, as the arenas continued to fill, and the future unfolded with every beat of the war drums, the world knew what had always been true. This wasn't the end of a dynasty. It was the beginning of its next reign. The storm had quieted, but storms always return. And in the wake of Roman's farewell, WWE's atmosphere was shifting once again, subtly, dangerously. Because while Solo Sikoa had risen with strength, precision, and the respect of a grieving audience, there was another force rising too. One not born of mourning, but of fire. Rage. Legacy not upheld, but reclaimed. That force had a name. Jacob Fatu. The word alone sparked unease. He hadn't appeared during Roman's tribute. He hadn't stood in the ring with the others. No ceremonial beads, no backstage tears, no final finger raised. And for months, he'd remained silent. Until now. On a brooding episode of Raw, the camera cut to a dim parking garage. One light flickered overhead. The sound of footsteps echoed. Then, boom. A production van exploded in a burst of sparks and flame. Out of the shadows walked a figure in a black hoodie. Broad. Unapologetic. His breath visible in the cold air. He moved past the chaos, stopped, and turned to face the camera. He pulled the hoodie down. Jacob Fatu. But his eyes weren't full of tribute. They were full of fury. "I watched y'all cry," he said, voice like gravel soaked in gasoline. "Watched you mourn my cousin like he was a god. But while you were kneeling, I was remembering. Remembering every time this family forgot who built this. Who bled for this before y'all got your first title." He stepped closer. "I didn't come to carry his legacy. I came to burn it down and rebuild it in my name." With that, the feed cut to black. Jacob Fatu was back. But this wasn't a return. It was a declaration of war. The next week, Solo Sikoa responded, alone, mid-ring, eyes burning with control, not panic. He wasn't there for Roman. He wasn't there for the family. He wasn't even there when it mattered. Now he wants to talk about legacy? He dropped the mic. "Step in the ring and say it." It didn't take long. 2 days later, WWE.com confirmed what fans feared and hoped in equal measure. SummerSlam, Solo Sikoa vs. Jacob Fatu. Not for titles. Not for rankings. For the soul of the Anoa'i line. Weeks leading into the event were soaked in emotional tension. Video packages traced their roots, both born into the same legacy, but raised in different storms. Solo. Quiet, disciplined, Roman's chosen successor. Jacob, wild, volatile, exiled even by his own blood. The commentary teams didn't speak in cliches. They spoke in prophecy. "This isn't a match," Michael Cole said. "This is the reckoning." The night of SummerSlam, the atmosphere was different. Colder. Sharper. 2 entrances. No pyro. Just war music. Solo came out first. Dressed in all white. Calm. Focused. Then Jacob. Bare-chested. Tribal war paint smeared across his face. Fire in his eyes. And as he stood at the top of the ramp, he stared at the camera and growled, "I ain't Roman. And I ain't your brother." The bell rang, and hell broke loose. It wasn't a wrestling match. It was combat. The ring barely contained it. Steel steps were torn apart. Barricades splintered. Every time Solo tried to lock Jacob into submission, Jacob exploded free with primal force. But every time Jacob tried to end it with a splash or a headbutt, Solo rose, methodical, patient, brutal. 20 minutes in, both men were bloodied. Gasping. Neither would fall. Then, the moment. Jacob backed Solo into the corner, screamed in his face, he was weak. "You're weaker." Solo's face didn't change. Then, he smiled. And whispered, "You talk too much." Spinning Solo. The arena erupted. Solo staggered back, disbelief washing over him. Jacob kicked up, screamed, and nailed a Samoan drop from the second rope. Kick out. Now both men were stunned. Then, something changed. The lights began to dim, just slightly. The crowd murmured. On the Titantron, a flicker. Roman's face. Just a heartbeat. No sound. Just his eyes. Watching. Both men saw it. And for a split second, just a blink, Jacob hesitated. Solo didn't. Samoan spike. Spinning Solo. The bell rang. Solo Sikoa stood victorious. But he didn't celebrate. He didn't raise his hand. He looked down at Jacob, who stared back, defiant even in defeat, and offered a single hand. The crowd waited. Jacob sat up. Looked at the hand. And slapped it away. He stood. Face to face. Solo nodded. Jacob didn't speak. He walked past him, paused at the ropes, and looked back. Not in surrender. In respect. Because this wasn't over. This was the beginning of an uneasy alliance. Of a necessary bond. Of a family now tempered in fire. And in the shadows, wherever he may be, Roman Reigns watched. And smiled. Because they weren't copies. They weren't successors. They were his evolution.